Hello. Welcome to our discussion about Chapter 2, which focuses on conducting research in social psychology. So this slide here will focus on some of the topics that we need to think about, some questions, like what is the difference between basic research and applied research? Those questions will be answered soon. Another question here, number 2, says, what is the purpose of institutional review boards on university campuses? So when research is conducted using human participants, we will answer those questions going forward. Another question is, what does it mean when someone says correlation does not equal causation? Number 4 says, is it possible to design a study to have strong internal and external validity? And question number 5 says, what is the value of replicating research? So those questions will be answered as we proceed. One thing to know, researchers always employ the scientific method, which is a set of procedures that we use to gather information, analyze the information, and then how to interpret it. Interpret it means, what does it mean? We'll go to the next slide here. So social psychologists conduct two basic types of research. They are called basic research, and the second is applied research. So basic research means basically we strive to increase knowledge for knowledge's sake. It does not attempt to solve a specific problem, so its focus is on acquiring knowledge. So applied research, on the other hand, increases the understanding of social problems, specific social problems. And then you see at the bottom of the slide here, it says basic and applied research can inform each other. They are interactive. We'll skip a slide here. Okay, so what is the process of research? Number 1, select a topic. So the researcher selects a topic of interest and reviews the past research. What did other researchers say about this topic? Number 2 says, develop a theory, generate a hypothesis. And hypothesis, I just want to remind everybody, that means hypothesis is a prediction. And then the end of number 2 here, it says, select the method that you're going to use in order to conduct this specific research. Number 3 says, obtain approval to conduct the study. And that is usually obtain approval through what they call institutional review boards, or IRB for short. And then once we get approval to conduct the research, Then we proceed to number 4, which says collect the data. Number 5, we analyze that data once we've collected it and reevaluate what we thought it was going to be about. Some of the number 6 says we report the results. And usually researchers that report the results by writing a paper and getting it published. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more in depth here. Number 1, selecting the topic. So the topic choice is often influenced by the social scientist's own life and culture. What was their experience? How does it apply to their lives? So we say influence, we just want to keep in mind that has to do with sorry for the pause there. So social scientists' own life and culture, that just means what was their experience and how did it influence their opinions? Okay, so at the bottom here, we see once a topic is selected, then review the literature to see what has already been learned about this topic. And for those of you who have either not or may have heard of this topic, basically reviewing the literature, that's called a literature review. Okay, so number 2 here says when we build a theory, that's comprised of a set of ideas that integrates all the findings and allows for explanations and predictions to occur. So the researcher gets a whole bunch of ideas and information from various resources. So according to this textbook, it says what makes a good theory? It has predictive accuracy. It has internal coherence. Number 3, it says it's economical. And at the bottom, it has fertility. Okay, continuing on the process of research, a good theory helps generate hypotheses. Remember, hypotheses is a conglomeration of predictions. Going to the next slide. Okay, so going further, research methods. Once the theory has been developed and the hypothesis has been formulated, a scientific method is selected to test the hypothesis. So that includes, building a hypothesis that can be the result of your observations. It can be talking about the relationships between items. And that term, the second to the last, is called correlational. And that has to do with basic relationships between items. Okay, and then at the bottom it says experimental. So experimental means determining like what causes something to occur. So this caused that. Okay, so we can see here researchers, they seek to determine the nature of the relationship between two or more factors. So you might remember I said in the previous slide, it said this causes that. So each one of those is called variables to a different degree. Okay? So that's why they call them variables. They have different values. Okay, and then underneath there, you see where it says the variables must be operationally defined. Operationally defined means here's how we're going to do the research, and this is how we are going to get the result. And that is defining the operation. I mentioned a little bit earlier, obtaining approval, that's through the Observational Review Board or the Institutional Review Board, which is why we call it IRB, Institutional Review Board. And they do that because we need to get acquire permission to conduct the research if it involves other human beings. And so what they strive to make sure is the research that we're conducting does not harm another fellow human being. So here we go. There's a little bit of repetition here. Institutional Review Board. Okay, they have the goal of protecting the participants. Okay, we're going to go forward here, skipping some slides here. So in the field of psychology, all psychological research has to obtain approval from an IRB. So please feel free to pause this slide if you'd like to look at all this in a little further detail. Okay, next slide. Once again, feel free to pause if you'd like to take notes and look at it in further detail. Okay, so how do researchers collect the data? They first start off by talking about, well, which people are we going to research, socially speaking? And that is called the population. That is everybody involved. Okay, for our uses, we're going to kind of define this a little more. So the population, I'll give you all an example. Maybe the researcher is conducting research about college students, okay, but the population might be all college students, but the sample might be the college students in their particular college. And that is why they call it the sample. Because psychologists, they cannot conduct research with every single college student in the entire country. That's why they need to gather a sample. And at the very bottom here, you see data may be qualitative, quantitative, or both. So qualitative means the quality of the data. A good example would be maybe a college student might say, I had a good experience at this college. So they're talking about the quality of their experience. Quantitative means the quantity, like has to do with numbers, like 60 or 70%, just for some examples. Okay, next thing here, collecting data. So there are three basic techniques for data collection in social psychology. You see, the first one is called self-report. So self-report just means the person gives you the data themselves. They are saying, oh yeah, I feel this, I feel that, from 1 to 5 as an example. Okay, the other type of data is called direct observation. And that's when the researcher will observe other people's thought processes and behaviors. Okay, going forward here, the next step is once we acquire the data, then we have to analyze the data, basically using two different types of statistics. Number one is descriptive statistics, and that's basically when we describe what they mean, what the numbers mean, and that is summarizing the data. All right, at the bottom here it says inferential statistics. That's when the researcher makes generalizations about the population from the sample. So they, in their sample, they might be talking about their specific college, but then they make broad generalizations about maybe this applies to all college students in the entire country, and that is a generalization. Okay, number 5 here, we see where it says we need to analyze the data. So once we acquire the data, then we have to analyze it. So if the data do not support the hypothesis, the theory might need to be re-evaluated or redone. So number 6 here, report the results. And that means publish in scholarly journals or present your findings at research conferences. Just a few examples. Okay, the reason why we go through these processes because reporting the results, that's for other colleagues to look at to see how we did it and what were the results of our studies. And that provides a series of checks and balances to determine if a research project makes its way into the discipline's body of knowledge. Yeah, you might remember I did mention earlier, we talked about observational research. Okay. The qualitative and or quantitative description of the people's behaviors. Naturalistic observation means observing the individual's behaviors in their natural environments. Okay, so the next thing is I would just like to tell everybody that the observer can join the group as a participant. And that allows the researchers to get close to the participant. After all, this is social psychology. All right. So feel free to pause the video here if you'd like to look at everything in more detail. Moving forward here, there are pros and cons of observation. And one of the cons is, as we can see down below here, well, there's a lack of control. We can't control how others behave. The second item says the presence of the researcher, it might alter the behavior of the people. If they know they're being watched, they might change their behavior. And the observer might be biased by what they're trying to achieve in this research. Okay, number 3 here, there's what's called archival research. So that just means examining all the existing records of an individual or group. And there's what's called correlational research. And that it talks about the nature of the relationship between two or more variables that are not controlled by the researcher. So it gives this example like maybe the amount of time that a student studies and their test score. Okay, skipping forward here. Going forward here, we're going to talk about experimental research. Whenever you hear the term experiment, always think about cause and effect relationships. So something might cause a change in something else. So there are a couple different types of experiments that social psychologists can conduct. The first is called field experiments, and that's a more natural setting, but there's less control in a field. But then there's what's called lab experiments, and that's easier to control and determine causal plane. Once again, please feel free to pause the video here and look at this in more detail. Those of you who have taken a lot other psychology classes with me, we did study this in very much detail. Moving forward, okay, so as it says here, some types of data collection can only occur in the context of a laboratory study. So it gives this example here, like the role of social neuroscience, what that might be playing in the basic specific interest. So whenever you hear neuroscience, you might think of, well, things like brain imaging techniques, like MRIs, or some examples. Okay, the last step here, it was replication. And that's when the researcher publishes their articles so other colleagues can see them. And then some colleagues might say, oh, I find that to be very interesting. I think I'm going to conduct the same study, but with different people and see if the results are similar. And that is called replication. Okay, here's a term that you might hear in class, and that is called meta-analysis. That just means analyzing other analyses. A whole group of analyses and then analyzing, putting it all together and then analyzing it in one big number. Okay, so according to our textbook here, it says, truth in science, it's never final. And just know, though, that scientists, they know this. They say, hey, these are the results that we've got to this point, but then something might change or be added to this and to change the results. Moving forward here, we're going to focus on studying actual behavior. So studies with real behavior, or so we're studying real behavior in social psychology. So the focus now, since social psychology has evolved, the focus now is asking people how they think, how they behave in specific settings, or measuring their cognition, which means mental processes, after showing a stimuli that's often present in social settings. Skipping forward here, we're moving forward. So there's a few questions here on this slide. You feel free to pause if you'd like to look at them. Okay, in summary here, social psychology uses the scientific method to learn about social behavior. So two specific research goals are acquiring and applying knowledge. And then we need to keep in mind the research process involves 6 steps. So first, a topic is selected, and then former research is reviewed. Second, a theory is developed or a hypothesis is generated, and then we select the method that we're going to use in our study. So third, approval is obtained from the IRB. Fourth, once we begin conducting our research, we collect the data. Fifth, the data is analyzed. And then sixth, the results are reported. Okay, so when we conduct observational research, we attempt to make quantitative and qualitative descriptions of behavior in their naturalistic, participant, and archival research. So correlational research, remember, we're talking about the relationship between 2 or more variables. It doesn't mean one causes the other. It just means they might have a little bit of a relationship. Okay, so experimental research, that's when we seek to examine the cause and effect relationship, and takes the form of field or laboratory experiments. And remember, we do these summaries here to help you put this in your notes, just in case you might see them in future exams or quizzes. All right, the second item here, it says social psychology is using exciting new data collection methods like the internet, virtual and environment technology, and neuroimaging. Okay, the next topic is replication, repeating a previously done study, but with a different sample. And remember, whenever I say sample, I mean a different group of people. So the scientific method basically is based on the idea that truth in science is never final. And that's because we use variables. And a variables, the quantity can change anytime. So when we study actual behavior, can be replaced by asking people how they would behave or measuring their cognitions. And cognitions means mental processes. Our final slide here says, we can only truly understand social behavior if we use different methods to study the same topic. Looking at that topic through a variety of lenses, so to speak. So when we do this, we capitalize on strengths and can control for weaknesses in each research method that we use. So this concludes our meeting today. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next chapter.